Welcome to a special segment of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the Charles Coulombe. So the Filial Correction just happened.
Indeed it did. And I'm really upset at everybody concerned.
You're upset at their concern?
Everybody.
You don't like that they're concerned?
No, I don't like the either them being concerned or the Pope giving them reason for concern.
Oh.
This is autumn. This whole thing is really harshing my mellow.
Yeah. Everybody needs to be a lot more laid back.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just calm. My nephew Albert said that he'd like to come out with a paper condemning the Pope for appearing to preach heresy and condemning everybody who noticed that he appeared to condemn heresy.
I know.
So that, but no, it's true. All kidding aside, and pulling ourselves out of that autumnal spell.
Yeah.
They had this correction of the Pope come out. Just this past weekend, on the 24th, 2 days ago.
What did you think of it?
Well, I did read it. Now, okay, ladies and gentlemen, I know that in Catholic polemical discourse, you're not supposed to read what people are talking about. Just talk about it. I know. But I read it, and it's long.
Because you're not supposed to read because it's so long. I mean, how can you be expected to read it?
You lose interest.
Right.
About a quarter of the way through, change the channel.
Yeah.
But let's pretend for a second I actually read through it. There are several things that occurred to me straight away. One is, it was written in a very respectful manner. They did not accuse the Pope of either, and they're two separate things, either the sin of heresy or the canonical crime of heresy, i.e. they did not say he is a formal heretic.
Okay.
And of course they admitted that they're not in a position to judge that. They cannot judge the Pope. They admitted that he is head of the Church, and also that the issue at hand does not touch upon infallibility. Though dollars to donuts, and speaking only for myself, I'll bet that in future years, just like Honorius and Liberius are used to oppose papal infallibility, one day Francis will be too. And with his little right behind it. Nevertheless, I'm sure that this is going to come up. This is an historical episode. Make no mistake.
Right.
We've had them before. If the church lasts long enough, we'll have them again. It's an historical episode. If you all out there were bored, thinking, nothing like that ever seems to happen anymore, you're living through one. You and me both. So they did this, and I have to emphasize also that the theologians involved, there were people like Walter Mosebach, Father John Hunnick, John Lamont, these are Roberto Mattei, these are some very hard-hitting, imposing theologians. I'd even go so far as to say more imposing than myself.
Well, hard-hitting indeed. I don't know if I've seen a modern theological document use the word heresy. I looked at this one used it 9 times.
It did use it 9 times, and it did so. Well, there are reasons for that, but let's back up a sec. They did not, as I say, accuse the Pope of heresy. It's very important to make that distinction. They appealed to him as head of the Church to clarify what appeared to be heretical readings, not just of the paper Amoris Laetitia, but of the conclusions that various national hierarchies have drawn from it, and various bishops have drawn from it. And in some cases in which the Holy Father himself has said they've drawn the right conclusions. So they end by dealing with 2 problems that they see in the current pontificate.
Okay.
And when I say the current pontificate, not just with the Pope, but in general, although, yeah, with the Pope, an apparent modernism in the sense that was defined by St. Pius X. The idea that doctrines can evolve and that there's no such thing as um, settled truth, as eternal truth, unchanging truth, but that these things move along as mankind moves along. And the other is Martin Luther.
Right.
Now, some people will be upset that they would dare to question the Pope at all, but they would dare say anything. If you feel that way, the Holy Father himself would disagree with you. He thinks you're wrong. Why do I say that? Well, as they point out, in this year of 2017, he's calling on everyone to support the anniversary of Martin Luther. Now, what's Martin Luther's great claim to fame? He told the Pope of his day, Leo X, to get stuffed, and he called him Antichrist. All right. This is the man the Holy Father is calling on us to celebrate. So, if your immediate knee-jerk reaction to the document is, oh, you can't attack the Pope, oh, you can't say anything about the Pope, oh, you can't, stop. The Holy Father himself, because I'm sure he is an honest man and no hypocrite, would tell you you're wrong. Having said that on the one hand, having said that they did the due diligence and so forth, as it were, and that they are eminent theologians, and that they made all the necessary distinctions, the only thing that is left is to determine whether or not what they said is accurate. They also made the point that at the end of the day they can't resolve this, only the Holy Father can, or his successor. There's one thing about Holy Fathers, is that they too, like the rest of us, die and go to meet their Maker. So, with all that having been said, what does make this area seem a little bit peculiar, as Father John Hunnick, who's one of the signatories, wrote, is that in this whole episode, whereas traditionally the Church has had varying schools of theology that have fought one another, with the Pope as sort of referee, in this particular episode, it appears as though the Pope is the leader of one of these schools of theology that are contending, which makes it a bit different. But he also had the important caveat, he or perhaps those who have insinuated themselves into his employ. So one can't know how responsible the Holy Father is for this stuff, I suppose. After all, he himself declared that the Holy Spirit gave him the gift of unawareness. So, what questions you got?
Well, okay. Well, is it going to get worse before it gets better?
You know,
Is it going to get nastier? I mean,
well, I don't know. There are a lot of imponderables at the moment. Personally, I doubt very much, despite the fact that it is an appeal to him for judgment, I doubt he's going to give them an answer. For the same reason that he didn't give the four cardinals, dubia, an answer. The reason being that if, as is alleged in this correctio, if he is desirous of changing the doctrine of the Church, he can't very well say that, he can't come out and say, oh no, it's unchanging and I line up with my predecessors, because that would ruin the whole thing. But contrariwise, given the nature of the papacy and the nature of the faith, he can't very well openly say, no, I'm breaking with 2,000 years of tradition. He can't do either one. So I doubt very much he's going to come out publicly with a statement that ties him to one side or the other.
Here's a question. Now, you stated in your characterization of Pope Francis, I think multiple times, he's not an educated man.
No.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does he know he's breaking with 2,000 years of tradition?
I suspect so, but I don't think he would look at it that way.
Okay.
I think he would look at it as trying to get to the true spirit of the gospel.
Right.
As trying to do what God intended, what Christ intended to do. As trying to apply the charity of Christ in a system that's been overgrown with the accretions of men. That's the way I think he would look at it.
I see.
Because that's the way all of his generation used to talk. And presumably, they think that way still, if think is the verb one wants. So no, I'm sure he means well enough, whatever that means. But I do not think, for the reasons I mentioned, that he's going to give an answer. I think it's quite likely that those signatories of the thing who are in positions to be punished by ecclesiastical censure will probably be punished. Because, human beings are funny people, and the Pope is a human being. And one of the things, I hate to get all Jungian, one of the things that does characterize our psyche, our mentality, is the law of opposites. We are the opposite of what we say. You show me a man who's always talking about freedom and openness, I'll show you somebody whose foot you don't want on your neck. You show me someone who's talking about order and discipline and blah, blah, blah. The guy's an anarchist. That's the way these things usually work. In the case of the Holy Father, he's always shown that he has the rhetoric of someone who's on about peace and freedom and all that. But in practice, it's my way or the highway with His Holiness.
So you don't think that this correction is just simply going to be dismissed? You think there's going to be discipline?
There may not be. If he's smart, there won't be. The smartest thing he could do, from his perspective, is to do nothing. Because remember, these are not people who have, with the exception of the head of the Society of St. Pius X, Bishop Filial, who signed it. With the exception of him, none of these people are folks with high administrative positions within the church. They're scholars, they're theologians, and there are a lot of them, but they're not bishops. They're not cardinals. Now, what will be interesting, however, is that this correctio is certainly stirring the pot and raising the general temperature of the whole issue. When the dubia of the four cardinals emerges, and it may or may not be accurate, but I've heard that the thing was written quite a while ago and was simply waiting to see if His Holiness would, respond,
right,
make its release unnecessary. Well, then we'll see, because that's going to be different. That will be four cardinals of the Holy Roman Church, although two of them are now dead. That will be different. And then if it comes to the same conclusions or expresses vaguely the same opinions that this correctio does, then suddenly, weighty as this thing is, its importance becomes a lot greater. It was, as I say, it was very tightly argued, and the arguments were very well backed up.
Okay. If the Pope's response is a more disciplinarian approach, what does that look like? I mean, what would be the discipline? I mean, it will be obviously okay, this guy questioned me, I'm going to send you to Siberia.
Yeah. Well, and it would be, as the late Frank Sheed said of Father Leonard Feeney, he was silenced but never answered. It'll make it worse. It'll make him look like a tyrant. But I don't think that will bother him much. He's not a man who's worried about his appearance.
No?
No, not really. When he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he cultivated a given image. He doesn't have to cultivate anything now. He's at the top.
Why did he do that? Why did he go to that hotel and not stay at the papal residence?
He was trying to give an image then. Now, I understand, he regrets that decision very much. But because he's one of these gentlemen, and we've all known them, sometimes we've even been them, who can never be wrong, he can't go back on it. And so he's stuck with the Motel Santa Marta, where he's finding you can check it any time you like, but you can never leave.
That's very Hotel California. I like that one. Okay.
Always time for a little pop culture, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. Okay. So he hasn't been accused of heresy.
No.
Okay, because some internet talk, obviously the internet's bursting. With
the internet's always bursting.
Internet's always bursting, but especially now.
If you want your mellow harshed,
oh yeah,
go on the internet.
Absolutely. But some people were saying that the Pope could potentially be deposed if he didn't formally renounce the heresy. So, but he's not even being asked to renounce
No, he's
heresy.
not being asked to renounce anything.
Is that somewhere down the line where we're going to reach this point?
There is no one with the authority to depose a pope.
Okay, but will he be pressed, I guess you could say, to renounce?
What they're asking for is for him to clarify and to explain what he meant. And for the reasons I've said, I don't think he ever will. He has, remember, they've drawn several propositions from what has been said. They're not saying he's guilty of them. They're asking him to say, do you hold these or do you not?
Okay.
And he's under no obligation to answer them.
Okay, so, well, I guess another way to ask is, I mean, how do you put pressure on a pope to handle the issue at hand?
Well, you can't.
You can't.
mean, you pray.
You pray.
You pray to God that he enlightens him or, helps him with his issues. Raises his consciousness. But at the end of the day, just like Pope Julius III, just like Pope John the 22nd, just like Pope Liberius and Pope Honorius, Pope Francis is the master of all he surveys. And whether he goes down in history as one of them or not,
I see.
depends on him. But you see, the ultimate check on the Pope is mortality. He's not going to live forever. There was an old joke in papal Rome, when Rome was ruled by the popes, that you could tell a lot about a pontificate as to whether the Romans felt it had lasted far too long or had been cut sadly short. And the odd thing about it was that somehow the number of years involved made no difference to the Romans.
Okay.
A pope could have, if they liked him, if he was a popular pope, he could have reigned 30 years and they'd be whining about, oh, he's taken from us too soon, cut short in his prime.
Right.
Another one might last a year and a half, and a year and a half too long.
Yeah.
So, which sort of pope he is, in terms of both the modern Catholic world and in the historical memory of Catholicism, that's entirely up to him.
Okay, so this talk on the internet is probably wishful thinking, where summon some sort of council and
Who would summon such a council?
I don't know. I really don't know.
No, see, that's the thing. I mean, look, he's not going to get rid of himself unless he's not going to change his mind about anything, unless perhaps he's on the road to Damascus. He falls off the shower one day and suddenly has a vision. I don't know. But he is obviously committed, like so many of his generation, to the course that he is on. That's simply the way it is. If you don't like that course, you can take a lot of consolation in the fact that very few people under the age of 60 share it. That's why people ask you, I think there'll be a schism. And in fact, Cardinal Caffarra pointed out that in a sense, de facto, there is a schism. Because what the Germans bless, the Poles, the Polish bishops condemn.
Right.
What the Archbishop of Philadelphia condemns, the Archbishop of Malta blesses. So in that sense, there already is a schism. But there will not be a formal schism for two reasons. One, the people that the Pope is really annoying are the people who make things happen, who through their blood and treasure and work accomplish the work of the Church. No less than John Allen, the then Rome correspondent of the National Catholic Reporter and now of Crux, made the comment somewhat earlier in the pontificate that, and he himself is a liberal, he says it's easy for liberals to say, oh, now the conservatives in the Church can find out what it was like for us living under John Paul II and Benedict XVI. So the problem with that kind of thinking, though, is that we being liberals, don't do anything for the Church. We talk, we write, We have our little seminars, but we don't do anything useful.
Mm.
Whereas the people who are getting annoyed are the people who actually make the church go.
Ah.
So that's one facet to it. The other facet, as I've said before, it's not so much an incipient schism as it is a generation gap. And honestly, if I were able to, I would sit His Holiness down with cardinals, bishops, monsignori, priests, religious, especially nuns of his generation, and force them to listen to Peter, Paul, and Mary singing "The Times They Are Changing."
Mm.
Because they are changing.
I thought that was Bob Dylan. Maybe
He wrote it.
Oh, he wrote. Okay.
Peter, Paul, and Mary are my favorite version.
Oh.
Anything Bob Dylan wrote, Peter, Paul, and Mary sang much better.
Oh, well. Okay. Well, that's a given. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it was. Today, of course, I think the Holy Father could sing better than Bob Dylan.
Of course.
But anyway.
Okay. Let's put a ribbon on this. You know, I always like to end on, you know, a positive note. So
It's autumn.
What should we be hoping for? I mean, just should we be hoping for a miracle, or is there sort of a natural happy ending that we should be hoping for?
Well, I think there is taking it, bearing in mind that I certainly sympathize both with the four cardinals and with the signatories of the document, and taking it at its worst possibility, that the Holy Father refuses to do anything, punishes the people who oppose him, and now I'm taking as a parallel John the 22nd, does all this stuff. This is the worst case scenario.
Right, the worst case.
Well, it's certainly making things very clear. It's providing an education in these things that people didn't have. A little bit like President Obama teaching American Catholics about the church's stand on birth control, when God knows the bishops never did.
Right.
By the time of the next pontificate, or the pontificate after this, things will be so crystal clear that the vagaries of the survivors of the 60s will be sloughed off, and the next several generations can take the work of reform and revitalization in hand. I mean, obviously, as taken as a generation, they're trying to affect everything that they didn't get immediately after Vatican II, any way they can. John Paul II, particularly Benedict XVI, were terrible setbacks for them. But they were important advances for the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they'll try to break everything they can on their way out the door.
Okay.
But they're on their way out the door.
So that's the positive side.
That's
Okay.
the positive side. The negative side, of course, is that the more they wreck, the longer it'll take to repair things. I mean, just to give you an example, the damage that the Holy Father appears to be doing to the papal magisterium is pretty raw. But on the other side, he has provided his successors with precedents to use. For instance, thanks to the Holy Father, the next pope, or the one after, will be able to come into the Vatican and just empty whole congregations and replace them with people he likes. That was never the case before, but the Holy Father established that. In fact, to be honest with you, the people I feel sorriest for in this whole invention are not the signatories, despite whatever may happen to them,
Mm-hmm.
are not people of our point of view, whatever our point of view might be. Not that I have any. But rather his elderly minions, what he's got, they're going to have a terrible time.
Yeah.
Which you would think they should think about now. They should make unto themselves friends of the, whatever it is, of mammon, as our Lord says. If I were an elderly ecclesiastical apparatchik, I would make friends amongst the younger clerics, just to guarantee my retirement. But no, seriously, it'll work itself out. the longer it takes, the worse it'll be. And again, it may be that the Holy Father, who in his own way wants to go to the church, I suppose, it may be that God will enlighten him.
One of my positive takeaways that I try to look at, so I don't get frustrated, is I use one of your precepts, God writes straight with crooked lines.
Yeah.
And I have personally witnessed from this mess, lukewarm Catholics get more and more militant and take their faith more seriously because of this mess. And I look at that and I was like, Charles was 100% right.
Well, and don't forget, too, I doubt anybody else could have canonized St. Junipero Serra.
That, too.
That, for me...
I thought there was going to be blood on the street. And it went okay.
No, the Francis effect quieted them.
Yeah.
It was like the Wicked Witch of the West dropping poppies on them. It was great. What?
Okay.
Sermons will make them sleep. Anyway, no, that wasn't for the Pope. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, nobody else, I think, could have done that and gotten away with it without the world media shrieking for his head. The sad thing for him is that when he says things like coming out against same-sex marriage, that kind of thing, he gets ignored.
Right.
It's a little bit like the late, God rest him, Paul VI, who really built a cage for himself. And when he wrote Humanae Vitae, it wrecked him. It absolutely wrecked him. He never wrote another encyclical because the outpouring of venom against him was so tremendous.
When he wrote Humanae Vitae?
In 1968. Oh, you had bishops, you had priests, theologians come out against it. You had two whole hierarchies, Belgium and Canada, come out against Humanae Vitae.
What did they say?
Oh, that's wrong. They never actually answer the thing. See, when you don't have an argument, you attack the person. In this case, they attacked the Pope. They didn't. It's old-fashioned. It's out of step. Blah blah. Stop, moron. What did he say? But Humanae Vitae was never answered or challenged because on its own merits it can't be. It was prophetic. Everything Paul VI said would happen to the relationship between the sexes happened exactly the way he said it did. That was because of contraception, which is this society's only real sacrament. Now, you can't answer the question, so what do? You shoot the questioner. But the question doesn't go away. And just as with this society of ours, and with the church of ours, which of course, since most Catholics in this country and the rest of the West practice contraception, fewer and fewer young Catholics to pay the pensions of elderly religious, many of the same elderly religious who were very much against Humanae Vitae, the poor dears, I feel so sorry for them. Well, similarly, with the questions that these theologians and the cardinals have posed, the Holy Father can refuse to answer them. That's his deal. But the question, and he can punish the people who ask, but the question doesn't go away.
Right.
And the longer it's left unanswered, the worse the payback.
Right. Well, that reminds me of another one of your great Coulombe lines. You can fight reality all you want, but in the end...
reality always wins.
Reality always wins.
And that was the thing. Paul VI's critics basically fought reality, which he stood up for. It may be that the situation is reversed in this case. I say maybe. Who knows? I don't know. Again, you can't attribute responsibility to a pope that he hasn't taken. Who knows what he's really thinking, if anything. But to the degree that he is at all responsible for the situation that the theologians address, to that degree, he and his sort have declared war on reality. And they will pay. Not through Catholics getting upset and jumping up and down on the internet and saying, he's not my pope. No. No, no, no. God himself will take care of it, but God often works through events. And as I say, when one thinks of an elderly religious priest who is whining because of the difficulty of getting the pensions together for his order, and then you realize when you chatted with him that the same priest attacked Humanae Vitae when it came out. Okay, Father, you got what you wanted. Hope you're enjoying it. But we all do in the end. We all get what we want.
That's our curse.
Heaven or hell. So, with that, I don't want to leave them on a sour note.
No, I don't. I'll try to get us out of this a little bit. The one thing that I think Pope Francis has the opportunity to do that I'll be happy is if he brings the SSPX back into the fold, which
he may not, given that the head of the SSPX signed the thing.
Oh, so you're saying the fact that he signed that is now...
I don't know. See, again, ladies and gentlemen, I do not know. But if the SSPX, given everything the Holy Father said before, if the SSPX are not reconciled in this pontificate, we will know it is because Filial signed the thing. And I got to say something else. Filial has never really been one of my favorite people. But it took a lot of guts for him to sign that, given the situation between Rome and the society right now. And you can only say, this is where I think is a good place to end it. When the signatories speak in the paper of they're doing it out of love of the church, love of God, and a filial devotion to the Holy Father, that wasn't just lingo. A filial devotion, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know what that means. It's the devotion of children to their father. It's something we should always have. Doesn't matter if your father's a drunk, who's ruined your life. He dumped your mother when you were 3, and you went through all sorts of orphanages. Whatever the case, however bad your father may be to you, at the end of the day, there's a certain irreducible core of respect you owe him. It may be you can't be around him for your own mental health, but you at least have to pray for him, at the very, very least. And in the case of the Holy Father, I think it's important to bear in mind that as much as anything else, the signatories wrote this thing for his sake, not their own. Because there's not a one of them, at least not one with a church position, who didn't feel, I'm sure, that on some level he might be endangering his own job. So bear that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, whether you think they were right or wrong, whether you think it was high time somebody said something, or that this is an act of incipient schism and Protestantism, whatever you may think, one thing you cannot deny is their courage in doing it.
Absolutely.
So it's we'll see how it happens. In the meantime, though, I would get back to that pumpkin latte, kick back, enjoy the autumn. If you're in a climate like ours, watch the last butterflies as they go off to Mexico. Enjoy the sunlight or the falling leaves or however autumn expresses itself where you are. And remember, Michaelmas is coming on Friday, and then all the festivals to Christmas and beyond. So, if the current present day is annoying, let the joys of the past and the future enthrall you.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.
And a happy Michaelmas.